Hey, what is going on, guys? This is SMAB Reviews, and today we are taking a look at the newest album from Drake titled Scorpion. Let's get to it. This review is long overdue. With the 4th of July holidays and just work schedules, I've gotten really behind. I intended to have this much before. I actually intended to review the Florence and the Machine, but it just didn't really work out. I didn't really have enough to say about that release, so I moved on to Drake. And boy, do I have stuff to say about this release. Leading up to this, there's a little background knowledge that a lot of people probably do know, but I do want to point out has been a feud between Drake and Pusha T. Pusha T, it's just been a beef between them. Pusha T absolutely annihilated him in this beef, and Drake really just kind of moved on and didn't ever respond to Pusha T, who released the story of Abaddon, and it just kind of ended. So a lot of people really expected Scorpion to be something to fight back. I mean, even the title kind of sounds like it's going to be, stinging something. It's fighting back. So what did we get with this release? Well, it's a 2-disc album, 25 songs, and about an hour and a half. And Drake has totally lost all kind of inspiration that he ever had. Some of his older music is fine. I've never been a huge Drake fan, but it's passable. But at this point in his career, he's just lost all inspiration to really produce anything of value or substance. He releases extremely weak, bland, and boring songs that really only cross over into mainstream because he does absolutely nothing offensive. Almost none of these songs could anything be said as experimental or different, and he really just does not break the boundaries of his music or the genre of hip-hop, and it really is so dull. The first album or disc is supposed to be the rap album, and then the second is more R&B. And you'd think that, just from that, I was like, I probably will like the R&B more. I feel like, if anything, Drake does have a decent singing voice. And while a lot of his songs do sound very similar and dull, at least there are some interesting songs on the more R&B side than rap. So I was slightly optimistic about that disc. But honestly, there's nothing separating the two discs. Yes, I could hear maybe a slight tonal change in between the two. But honestly, yes, the second disc is a little more gloomy and atmospheric, and the first is a little more upbeat. Besides the overall themes, definitely there's nothing different between these. We get rap verses in the R&B side, and we get crooning parts during the rap side. And honestly, like I said, the themes are the only thing that I can really separate. In the first disc, it's much more brag rap. It's boosting himself up and saying how great he is. And the second disc is more of the all sad Drake that we're all used to. We're all used to that sound, perfectly encapsulated by I'm Upset. It's just the perfect title to define that disc. But ironically, I'm Upset is on the first one, and that's just another example. It's really absolutely no difference. So what we're really getting is just a 25-track album. Now, regardless, even if they were totally different, I'd still review it as a full album. But we'd at least get some differences, and you could maybe take one as a totally different entity and think that one is completely better and the other one's worse, but really this all just bleeds together as one extremely dull and repetitive and uninteresting release. There's no storytelling, there's no introspection. All it is, like I said, is wallowing in self-pity and brag rap. And when it comes to just being completely destroyed in a song by another artist, you'd think that he'd try to retaliate. And I could say he kind of does with Emotionless and 8 out of 10 specifically. But honestly, those songs just try to make him sound like he is so amazing. I am the one taking the moral high ground. And that's what he sings about. And he tries to make himself seem like such a great person, but when you're bragging about that and specifically stating those facts, you're just pointing out that you have no real comeback. there's no real response to it. So instead, you're going to brag about how you were the bigger man and avoided that conflict. Even though you did engage, you couldn't continue engaging because you had no real strength and comeback to that to the story of Abaddon. And so with the Pusha T feud, he looks absolutely weak and just totally self-absorbed. It's almost like he doesn't even recognize that he lost but yet from a listener point of view, it's absolutely clear that he is so weak in this release. Now, pushing aside that Pusha T feud, it doesn't make the album any better. Like I said, there's two songs that really do focus on it. The rest are kind of all over the place. We do get some songs about the kid that it was before not completely confirmed. Um, so it's interesting. March 14th is an interesting song, I guess. But honestly, it just sounds like him trying to justify not bringing his kid around. And while I can respect not bringing him into the limelight, it sounds like he just tries to make a bunch of excuses for himself. He never really just owns up to the fact, and he just continues to look weak time after time. Again, don't think that I'm dissing him for not trying to make his kid public, because I can't blame him. The celebrity life is much different than a normal kid's life, so I don't blame him for that. But he never owns up to the fact that maybe he is responsible for some things. And we just get everything comes crashing down in certain songs. Like I'm upset or in my feels. Like that is the epitome of what's wrong with these songs. It's really funny because when you're listening on Spotify, the Genius annotation will come up, and both of them will just say Drake is upset, Drake is in his feels. It epitomizes the song and epitomizes what's wrong with Drake, because that's how he is. It's so bland and uninteresting, and he's not saying anything. There's no statements being made. He's not saying anything different with his music. He's just stating it, and he knows that it's such a generic feeling that there's everyone that's going to relate to it. Everyone can understand being kind of in a weird mood and just having to be by yourself to think about things. Everyone gets that. Everyone understands being upset or hurting from the loss of a breakup or anything. But he just doesn't say anything specific. He doesn't say anything about his life, except for, like I said, the two songs about his kid. He doesn't say anything interesting or new. It's just the same thing over and over. And don't matter to me, it's practically him just bragging that he had the money to buy a Michael Jackson sample. I don't think it's terrible, but for some reason he modulated Michael Jackson's voice so much and just made it sound so distorted. And for an artist who has a really good voice, it's not necessary. Now, yes, these were his later years of the sample that he had, so I get that his voice didn't sound perfect, but there's no reason to put such a heavy filter and so much dubbing over his voice. It just does not work. It's absolutely awful, and it is a disrespect to Michael Jackson himself. And really, all it is Drake saying, "Look, I had the money to buy a Michael Jackson sample," and that's just really unfortunate, because it could have been a decent song. I actually think that Drake and Michael Jackson could have had a decent song together. Now, obviously, Michael Jackson's dead, so they can't literally collaborate, but I feel like there could have been a good song that could have come out of this. Instead, it's a lazy attempt to just cash in on Michael Jackson's name. One song that I do feel I could legitimately praise, while it's not perfect, is Ratchet Happy Birthday. It's a very joking song. It's not serious, and it's one time that Drake doesn't take himself so seriously. That's just another problem with Drake. Everything is so serious with him. And this song at least is kind of lighthearted, or it seems so at least. And it's got a joking manner. It's different in the musical aspect. I think that he does try out some different musical elements. And honestly, while it is a little cheesy and a little tongue-in-cheek, that's intentional, I feel. And I do think it's actually a decent song, just because at least Drake tried to do something that wasn't just the sad, somber music. He did something different. And with an hour and a half of nothing, at least there's one song that can kind of be a little more interesting and a little different, a little more experimental. It is a high point in this album. So at least we got that. Now, I've spent a lot of time saying how bad this album is, and it's really not that bad, but that's because it's intentionally so inoffensive. He makes the music so bland, generic, it's intentionally trying to pander to everyone. It's something that he wants to be a hit. He's not trying to make any big statements or do anything different with his music or just try to create interesting music for his fans. No, this is completely to be a commercial success. He's trying to make music that will sell commercially, and it's obviously recognizable. And that brings up the very legitimate question of whether a bad album that was really experimental and just failed is worse than an album that didn't even try and just cashed in. Because almost anyone can make a fine album, but it takes some guts to try to do something different and experimental and just hope that the public will like it. And while I do think that the former can actually be bad, I don't think that I think that an experimental album that's just bad is still bad. That's undeniable. It's definitely still the case with this album because, like I said, Drake is just recreating his past hits at this point. I could almost guarantee that if I threw Hotline Bling in here today, most people would know. I could throw in stuff from any of his past albums, at least the past three, just throw them in, and no one would notice. It's all the same stuff. It's what Drake has always made. And I don't think Drake's the worst artist in the world, but he just is absolutely cashing in. He wasn't trying to stand with his artistic integrity. He's trying to make a commercial success, and that is just cheap and lazy, and that kills me to see an artist just completely cash in. And while I do feel most of this album is a cash in, there's at least some decent songs. Sandra's Rose is fine. Emotionless would have been good if it wasn't filled with just boring scoring, just him scorning every single person for what they do and not admitting that he does the same things and just seeming like he is this amazing person. And all of you need to realize that Drake has it figured out. And that just kills me. But musically and honestly, if you just took out the actual lyrics and just made the vocals sing along, it'd be fine. I actually do really like that song. And God's Plan, I think that's fine. Nice for What, that's another alright song. But yeah, it's just nothing. There's nothing here to really get into. And like I said, it's just absolutely offensive because he's intentionally trying to make inoffensive music. He's trying to make sure that he can get as much success as possible with this album. It's a 25-track album, and again, that is way too long. That never works with an album. Very rarely can that ever successfully work. There are certain albums that are double albums that work incredibly well. This is not one of them. Drake does not have that lyrical capabilities, well, his ghostwriters, and he and his ghostwriters don't have that lyrical capability. He does not have that vocal prowess and that creativity musically to really make anything interesting here, to make it worth that amount of time. And if this album was 10 tracks, yeah, it would be decent. It would probably get a higher rating because he didn't just throw so much filler in there. But since he did, it really does bog down the album, an album that already I have so many problems with. I really do dislike this album, not just because it's long. It has so many problems with it, and primarily it was just a complete cash grab. Drake knew he'd be successful if he made this bland, generic, successful sounding rap, and I'm sure he will. So I'm going to have to give this album a 2.5 out of 10. Now that may seem a little harsh, but please let me know what you thought. Again, it's not the worst thing I've ever heard, and there are some decent songs, but even the ones that I praised are really not that great. They're just shiny pieces of coal in the dirt. They're hardly worth any value, but at least they're better than the other 18 tracks, 19 tracks on this album. It's really unfortunate, and if he had tried to cut this down and just make a good 10-song, 12-song album, I probably wouldn't have loved it because Drake really is not as incredibly talented enough. He just doesn't have that kind of skill, I don't feel. Again, he still does have that incredibly bland sound about him, but I'd at least like it more. It could have got a higher rating. Unfortunately, it was not the case, and I just cannot condone this album or that style of cash grab. But let me know what you thought down below. Besides that, is there any other albums you'd like me to check out or anything I can do to improve the quality of my videos? Seriously, guys, thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys later.